Hi. In this lecture, we're going to talk about consumer behavior, which is chapter 6 in your book. To start, let's talk about Nike for a second. Nike wants to make sure that its brand is salient as you're deciding what apparel to wear in the morning. That means that it's present in your mind. So how can Nike really make themselves present as you make your decision to what to wear? One way that they figured out how to do this is by having Nike advertisement be on the weather app. So every time that you wake up in the morning, a lot of you tend to check the weather to see what kind of apparel you would wear, how many layers you need. So if you see Nike's ads when you're deciding what to wear, Nike was able to make themselves present in your decision to wear something specific and kind of maybe give you more options that aren't in your closet, may make you want to purchase Nike's products. It was a very successful campaign. So what is consumer behavior or buyer behavior? The definition of this term is the behavior that consumers, or meaning individuals or groups, display in searching for, purchasing, using, or disposing of products, services, ideas, or experiences that they expect will satisfy their needs and desires. If you think back at what is the definition of marketing, it's similar, but not quite the same. Marketing focuses more on the actual exchange, the transaction of ideas or services or products for something, usually money. But consumer behavior worries not only about that, but also what happens before that for the individual consumer and what happens after purchase. So it goes a little bit beyond, but focused on the individual consumer or consumers as a group more than the firm. So where do managers study consumer behavior? Well, understanding consumer behavior will help managers become better marketers, as it is the foundation for segmentation markets, positioning products, and developing marketing campaigns, which is all part of what marketing is. It's a big chunk of what is done and a lot of what goes into marketing strategy. So we have to understand consumers. In order to do this, we have to understand the consumer decision process. So think about a time where you recently bought something rather big, not something like at the grocery store, but something that you put some thought into it, did a little bit of research. Maybe something like a computer. It doesn't have to be quite as expensive as a computer, but think about it. So you realize that you need a new computer. Your old one was just not working anymore, and it was slow, so you basically recognize that you need a new computer so you can be able to keep doing your homework and your activities or apply for jobs, etc. So the second thing you do after you recognize the need for an item that you need to satisfy, then you do an information search. There's various ways to do this, but you tend to kind of get more information so that you are better equipped to make a decision. Then you evaluate your alternatives once you have a couple that are good options for you that may fulfill your needs and wants, and then you make the purchase. And then after that, you have post-purchase activities. And that's basically how you feel after your purchase. So are you satisfied with your purchase? Are you not? Do you review it? Do you not? Do you return it? Do you call customer service? Do you tell your friends about it? These are all post-purchase activities. So in the consumer decision process, you have a need to satisfy. You have your functional needs and you have your psychological needs. Now let's see, both of these items are meant to be worn on your feet, but they don't do the same thing, really. You can go from point A to B with both, but one fulfills your functional needs, so the need to actually get from point to B with something that protects your feet, but then another one also, on top of fulfilling functional needs, fulfills some psychological needs. And these are stilettos, and they are pretty expensive, over $1,000 for sure. So is there a need to be really spending that much money to get from point A to B? No. However, these shoes have an added value that gives psychological benefits to the consumer. It also is a way for the consumer to kind of like show some status, and that's a part of psychological needs. And maybe the consumer just feels great wearing these. So again, it's the performance of a product or service, and the psychological is the personal gratification consumers associate with a product or service. Are all products or services like fitting into one category or the other? No, not necessarily. Most of the time it's a combination of both, but it's more of, okay, what is it really doing more fulfilling functional needs or psychological needs? The kitty litter marketers know that cat owners have a need for litter boxes that do not smell. So in this one, they're telling you that this litter box, it's so good that it doesn't smell that your cat won't even find it because he can't smell it. But also that kind of defeats the purpose of a litter box, so it's kind of not the best ad. However, it was intended to be cute and funny and to highlight the need of the consumer for a litter box that does not smell. So in step 2, when you do a search for information, you can do this internally or externally. So an internal search for information has to do with going into your memories, into your memory bank to kind of see if you can solve the problem or start thinking about the problem from the information that you have in your memory. So if we go back to the example of the computer, an internal search for information for this product would be, okay, what are the brands of computers that I know? What are the brands that I like? Okay, let me see, I could consider getting a Mac, but which one, the Mac Air or the Pro, or I could consider getting a PC. You start thinking in your memory. And then an external search for information would be when you actually go online and research on Best Buy or research reviews for computers or things like that. Ask consumers about it. Ask your friends, hey, what computer do you have? Do you like it? Are you happy with it? Do you recommend it? Look at reviews. That's an external search for information. Some of the factors that affect the consumer search process are evaluating the perceived benefits with the perceived costs. So sometimes you may think, is it worth the time and effort to search for information about a product or service? So there is a thing as too much search for information, where for a certain product you might think, hey, maybe I don't really need to be searching a month for this product. Well, whereas for others, like maybe a car, a month seems like a reasonable amount of time to be searching for the right one. And there's also a term called the locus of control, which basically also affects how much you search for information. So the locus of control indicates how much control people think they have over the outcome or variables. Locus of control indicates how much control people think they have over the outcomes of various activities, such as purchasing a product or service. So if you think that your life has an external locus of control, you believe more in fate, external factors and such. Whereas if you have a stronger belief in internal locus of control, then you tend to do more search activities on your own because you think that your life is more in your control and your destiny is up to you. So there's different amounts of risks that can be attached to the purchase of something. So there's performance risk, financial risk, social risk, physiological risks, and psychological risks. So performance risk can pertain to something like when you buy a motorcycle, for instance, or a car. You want to make sure that it performs adequately, right? So you consider it, if you're buying a used car, you have to be particularly worried about performance risk. So you try to get brands and that are known to last longer, maybe like a Toyota, a Honda, but also brands that you also will look into like the mileage, because but you'll also look at factors like the car's mileage and whether it's been in an accident before and whatnot. And then you have financial risk, And this is the risk that is directly tied to how much money that you're putting into it. So obviously, the more expensive something is, the higher the financial risk. For that reason, companies can help consumers mitigate the financial risk by allowing them to return things within 30 days. This reduces that risk a lot, and it's not like that in other countries. Some places don't. Once you buy something, that's it, and you can't return it. But this is why a lot of people tend to like shopping at Amazon, because their return policy is really good. So that really does minimize the financial risk when shopping online, especially since you don't even have access to the product physically in your hands before you make your decision to purchase it. Then there's social risk, which is how are my social circles going to perceive this purchase? For instance, in terms of what you are going to wear, the shoes that you use, or whether you want to buy a dog or adopt a dog. People kind of take into consideration the social risks, how are people going to think and whatnot. And while it shouldn't, people still tend to do these things, especially since some of shopping items tend to be group membership items. So a lot of times people might buy something to feel like they belong in a group. So that's part of it too. And then there's a physiological risk. Let's go back to that car example. You're also afraid that the car might actually be dangerous, or if you buy a motorcycle, there's a physiological risk involved where you're afraid that you might hurt yourself. This thing can happen with medicines. What if they're counterfeit? There's a physiological risk there, or side effects and whatnot. And there's psychological risks, which are kind of similar to the social risks, but more in terms of how are these items going to portray you as a person, let's say, at a job. As a way to reduce some of these risks, the company Rent a Runway asks consumers to please upload some of the pictures that they have wearing the actual items that they rent, and this really does help consumers reduce some of the. So when you're evaluating your alternatives, there's different attribute sets that can help you make a decision. So for instance, the universal set, you have, if you're thinking about buying shampoo, these are literally all the shampoo products that are in the market. This is universal set. If you are thinking about doing an internal search for information and considering all the shampoos that you can just remember off the top of your head, that's your retrieval set, your personal retrieval set. So brands are readily brought up forth from your memory. And the brands that are in your evoked set are the brands or stores that the consumer actually is willing to consider buying. So you can remember maybe Pantene, but maybe that's no longer an evoked brand for you in your evoked set because you maybe wouldn't purchase that one anymore. But the ones that you would purchase would fall under your evoked set. And this is where brands really ultimately want to be, in consumers' evoked set, because retrieval doesn't really lead to conversion, meaning purchase. And universal is just all the available options out there. So that's just too broad. So when you evaluate your alternatives, your evaluative criteria consists of a set of salient or important attributes about a particular product. So these are the things that are important to you, and it can be many different things. So if you're buying an airline ticket, maybe you want comfort and you also want entertainment in your plane ride. Determinant attributes are product or service features that are important to the buyer and on which competing brands or store brands are perceived to differ. So Southwest and Spirit are quite different. For instance, Spirit tends to be a lot more economical, but it's also known for being very poor in comfort. So if your determinant attribute is to get to your destination the most inexpensive way possible, then your determinant attribute would be to pick, price, so it would be to pick Spirit.